The mop hit the marble floor with its usual rhythmic swish, back and forth, back and forth. Daniel had been doing this for 3 years now, and he knew every inch of the Riverside concert hall. He knew which tiles were slightly cracked, which bathroom stalls had faulty locks, and which storage rooms smelled like old wood and memories. But most importantly, he knew the sounds tonight like every Tuesday night. The main hall echoed with music. A pianist was rehearsing something beautiful, something that made Daniel's heart ache in a way he couldn't quite explain to anyone. He paused his mopping for just a moment, leaning on the handle, listening. The notes floated through the empty corridors like invisible butterflies, landing softly in his ears. He could name the piece. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, second movement. The melody was so achingly beautiful that it almost hurt to hear it. Daniel shook his head and went back to mopping. That was another life. Another version of himself that didn't exist anymore. His shift started at 7 in the evening and ended at 3 in the morning. Most nights the hall was empty by 10, and he had the entire building to himself. That was when he did something he probably shouldn't do, something that kept him sane but also reminded him of everything he'd lost. He played the pianos. Not the big grand piano on the main stage. That one was off limits, covered with a protective cloth every night, monitored by cameras. But there were practice rooms, smaller spaces with upright pianos that the music students and teachers used during the day. Daniel had learned which rooms had cameras and which ones didn't. He'd learned to be careful, to never leave evidence of his presence. Around midnight, after he'd finished cleaning the main areas, he would slip into practice room 7. It was tucked away in a corner of the building and its camera had been broken for months. Nobody seemed in a hurry to fix it. That's where Daniel remembered who he used to be. He'd grown up in South Korea in a small apartment where his mother worked 2 jobs to pay for his piano lessons. She'd seen something in him when he was 5 years old. The way his tiny fingers had reached for the piano keys at his aunt's house. The way he'd played a simple melody by ear after hearing it just once. By the time he was 12, teachers were calling him gifted. By 15, he'd won competitions. By 17, he'd been accepted to a prestigious music conservatory with a full scholarship, and then everything fell apart. His mother got sick. Cancer. The treatments were expensive, even with insurance. The scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses, not the mountain of medical bills that kept growing. Daniel made a choice. He left the conservatory, got a work visa, and came to America to make money. Real money, the kind that could save his mother's life. But America wasn't what he'd imagined. Without a degree, without connections, without perfect English, the only jobs he could find were the ones nobody else wanted. Dishwasher, delivery driver, janitor. His mother passed away 2 years after he arrived. Daniel sent money home for the funeral, and then there was nothing left to send money for. No reason to go back. No reason to do anything except exist. The concert hall job had been a coincidence. Or maybe it was fate's cruel joke. He'd applied because it paid slightly better than his previous janitorial job, and they didn't ask too many questions about his immigration status. He didn't realize until his first day that he'd be working in a place filled with the very thing he'd given up. Music. Everywhere. Always. It tortured him for the first few months. Hearing talented musicians practice. Watching them take for granted the very opportunities he'd sacrificed everything for. But slowly the torture turned into something else. A strange kind of comfort. At least here he was close to it. At least here, in the dark hours after midnight, he could pretend. Tonight was different, though. Tonight something unusual was happening. As Daniel pushed his cleaning cart down the main corridor, he noticed lights still on in the concert hall. Voices, movement. Usually by 9 o'clock, everyone was gone. He checked his phone. It was almost 9:30. He approached slowly, staying in the shadows. A group of people were gathered on the stage. Expensive suits, designer dresses, the kind of people who didn't notice janitors. At the center of it all was a woman in a red evening gown. Even from a distance, Daniel could tell she was important. She moved like someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Her voice carried across the hall, sharp with frustration. This is unacceptable. The gala is in 3 days. 3 days. How am I supposed to perform without an accompanist? A man in a tuxedo was trying to calm her down. Victoria, please. Paolo called in sick. Food poisoning. These things happen. I don't care about Paolo's stomach problems. I care about my performance. This is the biggest charity event of the year. Everyone who matters will be there. I can't just sing without music. I'm not some street performer. Victoria, Daniel recognized the name. Victoria Ashford. Her family basically owned half the city, including this concert hall. He'd seen her picture in the lobby, smiling at various fundraising events. Another person stepped forward, an older gentleman with silver hair. We're calling every pianist we know. Someone will be available. By Thursday? Are you joking? Any pianist worth hiring is already booked. The good ones plan their schedules months in advance. Victoria paced the stage like a caged animal. This is a disaster. Daniel should have kept walking. Should have gone to clean the bathrooms on the second floor. Should have stayed invisible like he always did. But he didn't. Maybe it was hearing Rachmaninoff earlier. Maybe it was the way Victoria's desperation reminded him of his own. Years ago when he'd needed something impossible. Maybe he was just tired of being invisible. He stood there at the edge of the hall gripping his mop handle. Victoria was still ranting. You know what?
Fine.
I'll make this simple. She raised her voice, addressing the room theatrically. If anyone here, and I mean anyone, can play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 well enough to accompany me, I will personally marry them. Right here, right now. How's that for motivation? The room erupted in awkward laughter. Someone whistled. The silver-haired man shook his head. Victoria, darling, you can't be serious. Why not? I'm young, I'm rich, and apparently I'm desperate. She spread her arms wide. Any takers? Anyone want to marry into the Ashford family fortune? All you need is the ability to play one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. More laughter. People were pulling out their phones, probably posting about this ridiculous moment on social media. Daniel's hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was crazy. This was stupid. He was a janitor. He was nobody. These people would laugh at him, humiliate him, probably get him fired. But that piece, that impossible, beautiful piece, he knew it, every note, every pause, every emotion. He'd played it 1,000 times in practice room 7 alone in the dark, pretending he was someone else. His feet started moving before his brain could stop them. I can play it. The words came out quieter than he'd intended, but in the sudden silence of the hall everyone heard them. Every head turned. Every eye found him standing there in his janitor's uniform, mop still in hand. Victoria's perfectly painted eyebrows rose. Excuse me? Daniel's voice was steadier this time. I said I can play it. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. I can play it. The laughter that followed was different from before. This wasn't amused laughter. This was mocking, disbelieving. Someone actually snorted. Victoria walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at him. Her expression was hard to read. Amused, curious, annoyed the janitor, she said slowly. The janitor thinks he can play Rachmaninoff. I don't think, Daniel replied, surprising himself with his own boldness. I know. The silver-haired man leaned over to whisper something to Victoria, but she waved him off. She studied Daniel for a long moment, her head tilted slightly. Then she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone about to watch something entertaining. All right, janitor. Let's see what you've got. Daniel set down his mop. The handle clattered against the cart louder than he'd intended, and the sound echoed through the concert hall like a gunshot. Every person in that room was staring at him. Some were smirking. Others looked plain confused. A woman in the back was already recording on her phone. His hands were sweating. His uniform felt too tight suddenly, like it was trying to strangle him. What was he doing? This was insane. These people were going to laugh him out of the building. Worse, they'd probably fire him. He needed this job. The rent was due next week, but his feet kept moving forward. Victoria Ashford stood at the center of the stage, arms crossed, watching him approach like he was some kind of interesting science experiment. She was beautiful in that untouchable way rich people often were. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect dress that probably cost more than Daniel made in 6 months. Well, she said, gesturing toward the grand piano. Don't be shy. Someone in the group giggled. Daniel recognized him. Kevin something. He worked in the administrative office. They'd passed each other in the hallways dozens of times, and Kevin had never once made eye contact. Why would he? Janitors were invisible. Daniel climbed the steps to the stage. Each step felt like climbing a mountain. His work boots, scuffed and worn, looked completely out of place on the polished wooden stage. He could hear whispers. Is this a joke? Maybe he's drunk. Someone's going to get fired for this. The grand piano sat there like a sleeping giant. Daniel had cleaned around it hundreds of times, had dusted its bench, had polished its black surface until it gleamed. But he'd never touched the keys. Never dared. This piano was worth more than everything he owned combined. This piano was played by professionals, by masters, by people whose names appeared on concert programs, not by janitors. Victoria walked up beside him. Up close, he could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral. She spoke quietly just for him. Look, I appreciate the boldness, but you can still back out. Save yourself the embarrassment. I won't be mad. There was something in her voice that wasn't cruel, almost kind, like she was giving him an escape route. Daniel looked at her directly for the first time. Her eyes were green, tired, he noticed. Behind all that makeup and confidence, she looked exhausted. I'm not embarrassed, he said. Not yet, anyway. A small smile flickered across her face. Then she stepped back and raised her voice to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to witness either a miracle or a complete disaster. I honestly have no idea which. She gestured dramatically. Please give our volunteer some space. And someone start recording this properly. If nothing else, it'll make a good story. The silver-haired man from earlier approached the piano. Daniel realized with a jolt that this was Sebastian Torre. The Sebastian Torre, one of the most famous pianists in the country. He'd won international competitions. He'd played for presidents. Daniel had watched videos of his performances online, had studied his technique, and now Sebastian was looking at him like he was a stain on the carpet. You know this is Rachmaninoff we're talking about, right? Sebastian's voice was cold. Not chopsticks, not some pop song. This is one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire. Professional pianists train for years to play it properly. I know what it is, Daniel said quietly. Do you even read music? Yes. Have you ever performed in front of an audience? Daniel paused. Not in a long time. Sebastian laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is ridiculous, Victoria. You can't seriously be entertaining this. But Victoria held up a hand. I made an offer. Let's see if he can deliver. She looked at Daniel. Whenever you're ready. No pressure. Just you, the piano, and your apparently hidden genius. The sarcasm was thick, but Daniel was past caring. He sat down on the bench and immediately had to adjust it. Too low. Someone much shorter had played last. He found the right height, positioned himself properly. His back straight, shoulders relaxed, hands hovering over the keys, and suddenly he wasn't nervous anymore. This feeling, this exact moment, he remembered it. Like coming home after years away. Like finding something you thought was lost forever. His fingers touched the keys, and the world shifted. The hall was silent, waiting, judging. Daniel closed his eyes and began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 are deceptive. They start quietly, almost hesitantly, like a question being asked, like someone waking from a long sleep. Daniel's fingers moved across the keys with absolute certainty. Muscle memory that had been dormant but never dead. Every midnight practice session in room 7 had kept the knowledge alive, kept the pathways in his brain connected. The music started to build, soft bells of sound growing, expanding, filling the space. In the first 10 seconds, the smirks began to fade. By 30 seconds, the room had gone completely silent. By a minute, people had stopped looking at their phones. This wasn't good playing. This was something else entirely. Daniel's body swayed slightly as he played, connected to the music in a way that couldn't be faked. His fingers flew across the keys, tackling runs that made Sebastian's earlier comment about technical difficulty seem laughable. This wasn't someone who'd learned from YouTube tutorials. This was someone who'd been trained, really trained by people who knew what they were doing. The piece moved into its more aggressive sections, and Daniel attacked the keys with a controlled fury. The piano sang under his hands. Each note was crystal clear, perfectly timed, weighted with emotion that you couldn't teach in any classroom. Victoria's hand had moved to cover her mouth. Her eyes were wide. Sebastian had gone pale. He stood frozen, watching with an expression that mixed shock with something that looked almost like recognition. He knew what he was seeing. He knew the difference between an amateur and a master. This was a master. Kevin from administration had completely forgotten to look superior. His mouth was actually hanging open. The woman who'd been recording had lowered her phone, too stunned to remember she was supposed to be filming. Daniel reached the second movement, the part he loved most. The achingly beautiful melody that always reminded him of his mother. The notes floated out like a prayer, delicate and powerful at the same time. His eyes were still closed and he was somewhere else now. Not in this concert hall, not in this janitor's uniform, not in this life. He was back in that small apartment in Seoul, his mother sitting on the worn couch, eyes closed, listening to him practice. The pride on her face, the way she'd worked herself to exhaustion so he could have lessons, could have a chance at something better. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he didn't bother to wipe it away. The music swelled, demanding everything he had. Rachmaninoff didn't write easy pieces. He wrote pieces that required not just technical skill, but soul. You had to mean it. You had to feel every note like it mattered, because it did. Daniel poured everything into it. Every sacrifice, every regret, every night mopping these floors while music played somewhere he couldn't reach. Every moment in practice room 7 pretending he was someone who mattered. The third movement was fury and joy combined. His hands were a blur. The piano was almost roaring now, filling the hall with sound so big it seemed impossible that one person could create it. In the audience, Victoria's carefully applied mascara was starting to run. She wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying because beauty does that sometimes. Real beauty. The kind that reminds you that life is bigger than charity galas and social media posts and whatever petty drama you thought mattered 5 minutes ago. Sebastian had sat down in one of the stage chairs, looking like someone had punched him in the stomach. His mind was clearly reeling. Who was this person? Where had he trained? Why was he working as a janitor? The piece was reaching its conclusion now. The grand finale. Most pianists rush this part, excited to finish, to show off. Daniel didn't rush. He let every note breathe. He gave the music the respect it deserved. The final chord rang out, powerful and perfect. Daniel held it, let it fade naturally, didn't cut it off. Silence, complete, total silence. Daniel opened his eyes. His hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was catching up with him. He looked down at the keys, suddenly aware of where he was, what he'd just done. Slowly he turned to face the room. Nobody was laughing now. Victoria was crying openly, not even trying to hide it. Sebastian was staring at him like he'd just seen a ghost. Kevin from administration looked like his entire understanding of the universe had been shattered. Then someone started clapping. It was one person at first, then another. Then the whole room erupted. Not polite applause. Real applause. The kind that's almost violent in its enthusiasm. People were standing, whistling, shouting. Daniel stood up from the bench, legs unsteady. He didn't know what to do with his hands, where to look, how to process what was happening. Victoria walked toward him, heels clicking on the stage floor. Her makeup was a mess. She didn't seem to care. She stopped right in front of him and just stared for a long moment. Then she laughed. Not mocking. Something else, amazed, delighted, maybe a little bit mad. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Who are you, really?" Daniel's voice came out rough. I used to study music. Before what? Before life happened?" Sebastian approached, and Daniel instinctively took a step back. But the famous pianist's expression had changed completely. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something Daniel had never expected to see directed at him. Respect. "Where did you train?" Sebastian asked. His voice was different now. Not cold, serious, professional, like he was speaking to an equal. Seoul Conservatory. "I was there for 2 years before I had to leave." "You had to leave." Sebastian repeated the words slowly, understanding, clicking into place. "And now you're here. Cleaning floors." It wasn't a question. It was a tragedy, stated plainly. Daniel nodded. He felt exposed suddenly, vulnerable. All these years keeping this secret, and now it was out there. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen. Victoria was still studying his face. "I made a promise," she said finally. "I said if anyone could play that piece, I'd marry them." The room went quiet again. "I was joking, obviously," she continued. "But I never break my word, so..." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I suppose the question is, what do you actually want?" Daniel blinked. Nobody had asked him that in years. What did he want? The answer came easily. I just wanted to play again. That's all. Just once more. Victoria's smile widened. Well, I think we can do better than once. Daniel didn't sleep that night. How could he? After everyone left the concert hall, after Victoria handed him her business card and told him to call her tomorrow, after Sebastian shook his hand and muttered something about wasted potential, Daniel went back to his cleaning cart. The mop was still there, leaning against the wall where he'd left it. The bucket of dirty water waited patiently. He had 3 more floors to clean before his shift ended at 3 in the morning. He picked up the mop and went back to work. But nothing felt the same. The hallways looked different. The marble floors seemed to shine brighter. Or maybe he was just seeing everything through the lens of what had happened. His hands still tingled from touching those keys. His heart still raced. Around 2 in the morning, his supervisor found him. Rodriguez was a good man. Never gave Daniel trouble, always made sure the schedule was fair. But right now his face was concerned. Daniel. My office now. This was it. He was getting fired. Of course he was. He'd interrupted an important event, made a scene, touched equipment he had no business touching. It didn't matter that he'd played well. He'd crossed a line. Rodriguez's office was small and cluttered with schedules and cleaning supply orders. He gestured for Daniel to sit, then leaned against his desk, arms crossed. So, you want to tell me what happened tonight? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Where would he even start? The video is already everywhere, Rodriguez continued. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Janitor plays Rachmaninoff, 500,000 views already. By morning, it'll be millions. Daniel felt sick. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Rodriguez held up a hand. You're not in trouble, relax, I just need to understand. You've worked here for 3 years. 3 years and you never mentioned you could play like that? It didn't seem relevant. Rodriguez laughed in disbelief. Man, I've been watching you mop floors, empty trash cans, scrub toilets. And the whole time you had that inside you? Daniel shrugged. It doesn't pay the rent. Neither does being stupid. Rodriguez's voice was gentle. Look, I don't know what your story is, but talent like that, you can't just bury it. You can't pretend it doesn't exist. I'm not pretending. I just accepted reality. Maybe reality needs to change. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Rodriguez sighed. Victoria Ashford called me, personally, at midnight. You know how weird that is. She never calls people like me. But she wanted to make sure you didn't get fired. She's very interested in talking to you. Daniel thought about the business card in his pocket. Embossed gold lettering. Victoria Ashford, philanthropist. A phone number. An email address. Like a ticket to another world. She also said, Rodriguez continued, that if you need time off to figure things out, it's approved. Paid leave. She's covering it personally. I don't need charity. It's not charity, you idiot. It's an investment. She sees something in you. Sebastian Torre sees something in you. Hell, even I see it, and I don't know anything about classical music. Rodriguez leaned forward. Don't throw this away because of pride. Sometimes life gives you a second chance. Most people never get one. Don't waste yours. Daniel left the office with his head spinning. He finished his shift on autopilot, his mind somewhere else entirely. When he got back to his apartment at 4 in the morning, his phone was blowing up. Messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Friend requests from strangers. Comments on social media accounts he barely used. Everyone wanted to know his story. Everyone wanted a piece of him. He turned off his phone and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would deal with it. Tomorrow he would figure out what to do. Tonight he just needed the world to be quiet. But sleep wouldn't come. He kept replaying the moment his fingers touched those keys. The feeling of coming alive again after years of being numb. The look on Victoria's face. The way Sebastian's arrogance had crumbled into recognition of real talent. At 7 in the morning, there was a knock on his door. Daniel dragged himself out of bed, still in yesterday's clothes. He opened the door to find a man in a suit holding a tablet and looking extremely uncomfortable to be in this neighborhood. Daniel Chen? Yeah? I'm from Channel 7 News. We'd love to interview you about last night's performance. We're offering $5,000 for an exclusive. Daniel closed the door. The knock came again immediately. Mr. Chen? That's a very generous offer. I'm not interested. $10,000. Final offer. Daniel opened the door again. I said I'm not interested. Please leave. The man's professional smile faltered. You're making a mistake. This story is going viral. If you don't control the narrative, someone else will. Then let them. He closed the door again and locked it. Over the next few hours, 2 more reporters showed up. Then a woman claiming to be a talent agent. Then someone from a podcast wanting to hear his life story. Daniel ignored them all. Finally, around noon, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize, but something made him answer. Hello? Daniel, it's Victoria. Victoria Ashford. From last night. I remember. Good. Look, I know you're probably being bombarded right now. I'm sorry about that. I should have anticipated this would blow up. She paused. Can we talk? Somewhere private. I promise, no cameras, no publicity, just a conversation. Daniel was exhausted. His defenses were down, and honestly, he was curious. Where? There's a cafe on Maple Street. The brew house, do you know it? He did. It was in a much nicer part of town than where he lived, but he'd passed it on the bus. I can be there in an hour. Perfect. I'll be in the back corner. And Daniel, thank you for giving me a chance. The brew house was the kind of place where coffee cost $8 and came with a leaf design in the foam. Daniel felt completely out of place in his jeans and old jacket, but the barista smiled at him warmly. Maybe she'd seen the video. Victoria was already there, wearing casual clothes. Well, casual for someone like her. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, but no makeup, hair in a simple ponytail. She looked younger like this. More real, she stood when she saw him. You came. I wasn't sure you would. They sat down. Victoria had already ordered him a coffee. Black, no sugar. Somehow she'd guessed right. So, she began, I'll get straight to it. I want to help you. I don't need help. You're working as a janitor when you play piano like that. I think you need help, Daniel bristled. There's nothing wrong with being a janitor. It's honest work. I didn't say there was. But it's not what you're meant to do. You know it, I know it. Everyone who heard you play last night knows it. And what am I meant to do? Victoria leaned forward. Play, perform, share that gift with the world. You're too talented to spend your life mopping floors in the dark. Talent doesn't pay bills. It does if you let it. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. I did some research. Sebastian made some calls. We found your records from Seoul Conservatory. Your professors there still remember you. They said you were one of the most promising students they'd ever taught. They were devastated when you disappeared. Daniel didn't open the folder. That was a long time ago. It doesn't have to be. Victoria's voice was intense. I have connections, real ones. I can get you auditions at proper venues. I can connect you with teachers who can help you get back to performance level. I can even help with the financial side while you transition. Why? Daniel asked. Why do you care? Victoria sat back. You want the honest answer? Yes. Because last night when you played, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Real emotion. Real beauty. Not the fake society nonsense I usually deal with. Not the performances where technically perfect pianists play perfectly boring music. She shook her head. You made me cry. When was the last time art made you cry? Daniel thought about it. Last week. Practice room 7, Chopin. Victoria's eyes widened. You've been practicing? Where? The concert hall. Late at night. There's a room with a broken camera. You've been practicing for 3 years and nobody knew. That was the point. But why? Why hide it? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Because hope hurts. When I first came to America, I thought I'd save my mother and then come back to music. But she died, and suddenly there was no reason for anything. Music just reminded me of everything I'd lost. So you buried it. I tried, but I couldn't stop completely. I needed it. Like breathing. So I practiced in secret where it wouldn't matter. Where no one would see, where I could pretend I was still that person without actually being him. Victoria's expression softened. What if you could be that person again? For real this time? I'm 31 years old. Most concert pianists start their careers in their 20s. Most, not all. And you already have something they don't. What's that? A story. People love a good story. The janitor who played Rachmaninoff. It's already everywhere. You're already famous whether you want to be or not. The question is what you do with it. Daniel finally opened the folder. Inside were printouts. Articles about late-blooming musicians. Contact information for teachers and agents. a proposed schedule of auditions and performances, and at the bottom, a check. Made out to him. For $50,000, he stared at it. I can't accept this, it's not charity. Think of it as an advance. You'll pay me back when you're successful. And if I'm not successful? Victoria smiled. Then I'm out $50,000. I'll survive. This is crazy. Maybe. But what's crazier is letting your talent die because you're afraid. Because that's what this is really about, right? Fear, she wasn't wrong. Daniel was terrified. Terrified of hoping again. Terrified of trying and failing. Terrified of being seen. I need time to think, he said. Of course. But not too much time. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. As Daniel left the cafe, his phone buzzed. A text from Rodriguez. FYI, Sebastian Torre wants to meet you. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at the concert hall. Don't be late. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, people rushing past him, cars honking, the city moving at its usual frantic pace. And for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside. Maybe Rodriguez was right. Maybe reality needed to change. He pulled out his phone and called Victoria. I'm in, he said when she answered. I don't know if this will work, but I'm in. The next morning, Daniel showed up at the concert hall at 9:45, early because being late to meet Sebastian Torre felt like a sin. He wore his best clothes, which weren't saying much. Clean jeans, a button-up shirt he'd ironed himself, shoes that weren't work boots. He felt like a kid playing dress-up. The main entrance was locked this early, so he went around to the employee entrance. The security guard, Tom, did a double-take when he saw him. Daniel, man, you're famous now. My daughter showed me the video. She shared it like 50 times. Tom was grinning. You coming into work? Meeting with Sebastian Torre. Tom's eyes went wide. No kidding? That's huge, man. Good luck. The hallways felt different in the daytime, brighter, more official. Daniel had only ever seen this place at night, when it belonged to the cleaning crew in the shadows. During the day, it belonged to musicians and artists and people who mattered. He found Sebastian in the main hall, sitting at the grand piano, playing something soft and complicated. Daniel recognized it. Debussy, Clair de Lune. When Sebastian saw him, he stopped playing and gestured to a chair on the stage. Sit, we need to talk, Daniel sat. His heart was hammering. Sebastian studied him for a long moment. I spent half the night researching you. Called some colleagues in Korea. Found your old professors. Do you know what they told me? No. They said you were brilliant. Not just talented. Brilliant. They said you had something that can't be taught. A natural understanding of music that most people never develop even after decades of study. Sebastian paused. They also said you disappeared without explanation. They thought you'd given up music entirely. I had to leave. Family emergency. And then you never came back. Why? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Life got complicated. Life is always complicated. That's not a reason to bury your gift. Sebastian's tone wasn't harsh, but it was direct. You're 31. That's not too old, but it's not young either. If you want to restart your career, we need to be realistic about what that means. I'm listening. Your technique is still excellent. That was clear last night. But you're rusty. There are pieces you probably haven't played in years. Your repertoire needs expansion. Your stage presence needs work because performing in an empty practice room is different from performing for a real audience. Sebastian counted off on his fingers. And then there's the business side. Agents, managers, publicity, networking. Do you know anything about that? No. Of course you don't. Why would you? Sebastian sighed. Here's what I'm proposing. I'll take you on as a private student. 3 sessions per week. We'll work on rebuilding your repertoire, fixing any technical issues, preparing you for auditions. Daniel's throat went dry. I can't afford your rates. Victoria's covering it. She's quite determined to see you succeed. Honestly, I think she feels guilty. About what? About living in a world where someone like you has to scrub toilets to survive. Sebastian's expression softened slightly. She's not wrong to feel guilty. The classical music world is elitist and unfair, but that doesn't mean we can't try to fix small pieces of it. Over the next few weeks, Daniel's life became unrecognizable. He quit his janitorial job. Rodriguez understood, actually shook his hand and told him to come back and play a concert someday. The crew threw him a small party. They ordered pizza and made jokes about him being too famous for them now. It was bittersweet. Sebastian's lessons were brutal. Again, Sebastian would say for the 20th time. That transition needs to be smoother. You're rushing. Feel the music, don't just play the notes. Again. Your left hand is too loud. Balance. Again. This isn't a practice room anymore. This is preparation for Carnegie Hall. Act like it matters. There were days Daniel wanted to quit. Days when the criticism felt like too much. When the pressure made him question everything. He'd go back to his apartment exhausted, hands cramping, head spinning with corrections and adjustments. But then he'd sit at the used piano Victoria had bought him. Second-hand, but still nicer than anything he'd ever owned, and he'd play. And he'd remember why he was doing this, because the music mattered. Victoria checked in regularly. She'd show up at his apartment with coffee and encouragement, asking how lessons were going if he needed anything. She introduced him to people. Important people. Critics, venue managers, other musicians. This is Daniel Chen, she'd say. The pianist I told you about. You need to hear him play. She was building something. A network of support. A foundation for a career that didn't exist yet but might. Not everyone was supportive. The classical music world could be cruel. Online forums buzzed with skepticism. He's just a publicity stunt. Victoria Ashford's newest charity project. He'll never make it at the professional level. Some of the criticism was harsher. Comments about his background, his age, his lack of formal credentials. People questioned whether his viral moment was luck or skill, whether he deserved the opportunities he was getting. Daniel tried not to read the comments, but sometimes he couldn't help himself. Late at night, alone in his apartment, he'd scroll through forums and social media, absorbing every negative word like poison. Sebastian found out and was furious. "Stop reading that garbage," he snapped during a lesson. "Those people aren't musicians. They're jealous, bitter, or both. Your job is to play. Let your performance speak for itself. What if they're right? What if I'm not good enough?" Sebastian stood up from the piano bench and walked over to Daniel. "Listen to me very carefully. I have worked with hundreds of students. Some talented, some mediocre, some exceptional. You are exceptional. Your technique needs polish, yes. Your repertoire needs expansion, yes. But your fundamental understanding of music, your emotional connection to it, that's something most people never achieve. But I've been out of the game for so long. So what? Van Cliburn didn't win the Tchaikovsky competition because he was the youngest or the most conventionally trained. He won because he made people feel something. That's what you do. That's your gift." 3 months after the viral video, Victoria arranged his first real audition. A small venue downtown. Nothing major, but a legitimate performance opportunity. If he did well, they'd invite him back for a full concert. The night before, Daniel couldn't sleep. He practiced until his neighbors banged on the wall. Then he lay in bed, running through every piece in his head, imagining every possible mistake. Victoria called at midnight. "Are you panicking?" "How did you know?" "Because I would be. Listen, whatever happens tomorrow, you've already accomplished something amazing. 3 months ago, you were mopping floors. Tomorrow, you're auditioning as a concert pianist. That's not nothing. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. And you try again. That's how this works. Nobody becomes great without failing sometimes." The audition space was intimate. Maybe 100 seats, wooden floors, good acoustics. The panel consisted of 3 people. The venue director, a local music critic, and a retired pianist who apparently was some big deal. Daniel sat at the piano. His hands were shaking. "Whenever you're ready," the venue director said. He'd chosen Chopin's Ballade No. 1. Sebastian had advised against it. Too common, he'd said. Too many famous interpretations. But Daniel didn't care. This piece meant something to him. His mother had loved it. He started playing. The first few measures were shaky. He could hear the nerves in his playing, the slight hesitation. But then something shifted. He stopped thinking about the panel watching him, stopped thinking about the stakes. He just played. The music took over. When he finished, there was silence. Then the retired pianist spoke. "Where have you been hiding?" "I wasn't hiding. I was working." "Well, stop working. Start playing." That was remarkable. They hired him on the spot, not just for one concert, but for a series. 3 performances over the next 6 months. Daniel walked out of there in a daze. Victoria was waiting outside. When she saw his face, she knew. "You got it. I got it." She hugged him and he let her, too overwhelmed to be self-conscious. But success brought new problems. The pressure increased. Now he had real performances coming up, real audiences who would judge him, real critics who would write reviews. The internet attention intensified. More interviews, more requests, more people wanting pieces of him. And then there was the guilt. He thought about his old co-workers, still mopping floors and emptying trash cans. He thought about Rodriguez, still dealing with difficult schedules and broken equipment. He thought about all the people working hard at invisible jobs, people just as deserving of opportunities but who would never get them. Why him? What made him special except for luck and Victoria's intervention? Sebastian noticed him struggling. You're overthinking again. I just don't know if I deserve this. Deserve? Sebastian looked angry. You think music is about deserving? You think Mozart deserved his genius? Beethoven deserved his deafness? Talent isn't fair. Opportunity isn't fair. Life isn't fair. But you have a gift and hiding it doesn't help anyone. It feels selfish. It would be selfish to waste it. You're not taking opportunities from others by succeeding. You're showing people that second chances exist. That talent can come from anywhere. That maybe, just maybe, we should pay more attention to the people we usually ignore. Daniel practiced harder, pushed through the doubt and the guilt and the fear, because Sebastian was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone who'd been told they weren't good enough, weren't the right age, didn't have the right background. His first official concert was in 4 months. 4 months to prove that the janitor who played Rachmaninoff wasn't just a viral moment, that he was the real thing. 4 months to prove he deserved the second chance. 4 months to become who he was always meant to be. The day of the concert arrived with winter cold that made Daniel's fingers stiff. He spent the morning doing hand exercises, warming them up, trying not to think about the evening ahead. The venue had sold out within hours of tickets going on sale. 300 seats. 300 people coming to hear him play. Some were coming because they'd seen the viral video. Others because Victoria had convinced them. Some were critics ready to tear him apart. And a few, he hoped, were coming simply because they loved music. Sebastian had scheduled a final practice session at noon. When Daniel arrived at the hall, his teacher was already there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. I've been thinking about your program, Sebastian said. It's ambitious. Maybe too ambitious for a debut. Daniel had chosen a challenging lineup. Bach's Goldberg Variations, Chopin's Ballade No. 1, and closing with Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Nearly 2 hours of music, some of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire. I can handle it, Daniel said. Can you? This isn't about skill. It's about endurance, about maintaining focus and emotional connection for that long. Professional pianists train years for programs like this. I'm ready. Sebastian studied him. You're scared, terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it control you. Sebastian sat at the piano. One more run through. I want to hear the Rachmaninoff. They worked until 3 in the afternoon. Sebastian was relentless, stopping him constantly, demanding more precision, more emotion, more everything. By the time they finished, Daniel's hands were tired and his nerves were shot. Go home, Sebastian ordered. Rest, eat something. Don't practice anymore. You're as ready as you'll ever be. Back at his apartment, Daniel tried to follow instructions. He made soup but couldn't eat it. Tried to nap but couldn't sleep. Kept running through pieces in his head, imagining mistakes, catastrophic failures. At 5 o'clock, Victoria called. How are you feeling? Like I might throw up. Perfect. That means you care. Listen, I just wanted to say that whatever happens tonight, I'm proud of you. You've worked incredibly hard. You've earned this. Have I, though? It's only been 6 months. Most pianists prepare for years. Most pianists haven't lived your life. They haven't sacrificed what you've sacrificed. They haven't had to claw their way back from the bottom. Victoria's voice was firm. You belong on that stage. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. The venue was downtown, a historic building with ornate architecture and excellent acoustics. Daniel arrived 2 hours early, wearing the suit Victoria had bought him. It was the nicest thing he'd ever worn. He barely recognized himself in the mirror. Backstage was chaos. Sound technicians adjusting equipment, staff preparing programs, other performers from opening acts warming up. Daniel found the green room and sat alone, trying to center himself. Rodriguez showed up at 6:30 with half the old cleaning crew. They were dressed up, uncomfortable in formal clothes, but grinning widely. "We couldn't miss this, man. You're one of us." Their presence steadied him somehow. These were people who knew him when he was nobody, when he was just Daniel the janitor who worked hard and kept to himself. They didn't care about the publicity or the pressure. They just wanted to see their friend succeed. Sebastian found him at 7. "The house is full. Standing room only. I've never seen this venue so packed. That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It's supposed to make you realize what you've accomplished. 6 months ago, nobody knew your name. Now hundreds of people paid to hear you play. That's extraordinary." At 7:25, the stage manager gave him the 5-minute warning. Daniel walked to the stage entrance and peered through the curtain. The seats were indeed full. He spotted Victoria in the front row, dressed elegantly, looking nervous for him. Rodriguez and the crew were scattered throughout the middle section. And in the back, he saw faces he didn't recognize. Strangers who'd come to see if the janitor's viral moment was real or just luck. The house lights dimmed. The stage manager gave him the signal. Daniel walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate and loud, not polite concert applause. Real enthusiasm. People were actually excited to see him. It was overwhelming and humbling and terrifying. He sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, positioned his hands. The hall went silent, 300 people holding their breath. He began with Bach. The Goldberg variations are mathematically precise, intellectually demanding. Every note has a purpose, every phrase a structure. It's music that requires absolute control and deep understanding. Daniel played it like a meditation. Each variation was a small story, a different mood, a different color. His fingers moved with certainty, navigating the complex counterpoint with clarity and grace. This was the perfect opening, he realized. It settled his nerves, established his credibility, showed the audience he wasn't just a one-trick viral sensation. When he finished the Bach, the applause was respectful, impressed. The critics in the audience were nodding. Sebastian, watching from the wings, allowed himself a small smile. During the brief intermission, Daniel stayed backstage, drinking water, stretching his hands. He could hear the buzz of conversation from the audience. People were engaged, interested. So far, so good. The second half began with Chopin. This was different. Where Bach was intellectual, Chopin was pure emotion. The ballad number 1 told a story without words, painting pictures with sound. It was romantic and dramatic and technically treacherous. Daniel closed his eyes and thought of his mother. The piece she'd loved, the reason he'd chosen it. His playing transformed. Every note was weighted with feeling. The quiet sections were achingly tender. The dramatic sections were powerful without being harsh. He wasn't just playing notes anymore. He was channeling something deeper. In the audience, Victoria was crying again. She'd seen him practice this piece dozens of times, but this was different. This was real. This was him opening his heart in front of 300 strangers and not holding anything back. The final chord of the Chopin resonated through the hall. This time the applause was different, warmer, more personal. People weren't just impressed. They were moved. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The piece that had started it all, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Daniel paused before beginning. This piece had changed his life. That night in the concert hall when he'd played it on impulse, revealing his secret to the world. Now he was playing it again, but everything was different. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't pretending he was a pianist, really, truly a pianist. The opening chords filled the hall like a declaration. Daniel poured everything into it. 6 months of grueling practice, years of secret longing, a lifetime of sacrifice and loss and stubborn hope. All of it came through in the music. The first movement was powerful. The second movement was heartbreaking. The third movement was triumphant. His fingers flew across the keys, tackling runs that would make most pianists nervous. But he wasn't nervous anymore. He was home. This was where he belonged. Not mopping floors in the dark. Not hiding his talent. Here, on this stage, making music that mattered. As he approached the final section, Daniel felt something shift. The audience disappeared. The pressure disappeared. There was only the piano and the music and the moment. The final chord rang out, massive and definitive. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the audience erupted. Not polite applause, Not respectful recognition. A standing ovation. All 300 people on their feet, clapping, cheering, some shouting. Rodriguez was whistling. Victoria was openly sobbing. Even the critics in the back were standing, faces showing genuine emotion. Sebastian was in the wings, and when Daniel caught his eye, his teacher nodded. Pride and vindication and something that might have been relief. Daniel stood and bowed. The applause continued. People weren't stopping. He bowed again. Still they clapped. Someone yelled, "Encore." Others took up the cry, "Encore, encore." Daniel looked at Sebastian, who shrugged. "Your call." He sat back down at the piano. What to play? He hadn't prepared an encore. Then he remembered something. A small piece his mother used to sing to him when he was little. A Korean folk song he'd arranged for piano years ago. He played it from memory. Simple, sweet, just 2 minutes long. A lullaby that meant home and family and everything he'd lost and found again.